1. Madam Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, on both sides, we recognize that trauma is bad, and on both sides, we want to be able to move on from it. But this debate is about where we anchor that ability for mental health care services to start on in order to help you move forward. As ironic as it is, sometimes we need to be able to look at the past in order to define the present, in order for the future to be better. We think that regardless of trauma, we do not know if the person who experienced it will like who they were after, precisely because it was so painful. That is why the POI I raised to the previous speaker, of which there was no response to, cracks a hole in their case to question the lens of whether or not they truly would like that individual. Even if you did and you were fully strong and capable of to be able to accept that, we recognize people exist in a spectrum of emotional sensitivity. Some are stronger, some are weaker, some have a thicker skin and a thinner skin. And we think that uniquely on our side, because you're able to look what happened before you, you're able to better deal with future trauma that may happen, which is a function of understanding those triggers and things that caused it to begin with. We think, regardless of this trauma being good or bad, or you being strong or not, we uniquely have to be able to deal with it and be able to define those things and not let it define you. A couple of features of our model. Number 1, this is a value judgment debate about what people want and what is healthier, and the interest of these particular mental health care services to be able to anchor on that, to be able to help you move forward from that traumatic experience. This is uniquely a debate about where doctors, psychologists, and psychiatrists anchor upon. On-side gov, you anchor in the future. On-side opposition, you anchor in the past. And we think that this is a simple case of you have to take one step back in order to be able to analyze and see that step of where you're going in order to make those 2 steps forward much better. The second thing is that mental health care services have a goal of both prevention and treatment, meaning you have to take a look at both preventive and reactionary cases. This is particularly about not just about how you deal with the trauma that happened, because on both sides it's kind of fucked up, but how you're better able to deal with future trauma, which we know is an eventuality. We all experience trauma in many different ways, and the point in which in Gov model, you skip that step and you assume that it's fine and dandy, you're all good, is exactly the point in which you become ill-equipped to deal with future trauma, and your inability to take a look at and anchor who you once were can lead to a sense of being lost and a sense of even becoming more anxious and depressed because you solely anchor it in the future, which puts more proximity to that particular issue that harmed you, whether that be rape, molestation, verbal abuse, which lead to severe and chronic depression and anxiety, which we think is a harm. What is my case? My case is why looking at the past helps you define who you are in the present, the person getting treatment, because this debate isn't about like time travel, but more importantly, the impact of being able to understand how you can better be shaped in the future to also deal with future trauma. We have to understand, this is not an actor motion per se, but about the role of mental health care services in terms of being able to give people not just what might feel good in the short term or what they want, but what about they need. Because the point in which you're so affected and jaded by the trauma is a point in which that defines and characterizes who you are in the present because of its proximity and the visceral nature of that particular regard. Meaning, you can be lost, you can be dazed and confused, you can be scared, you can be anxious. In order to have a sense of solace, you need a solid anchor point of who you were in the past, precisely because of what I said. We don't know if you like who you are in the future, but I'm pretty sure, regardless of what kind of trauma, you were fine before that point. How are we able to redefine that trauma when we're able to look at the past? It is the point in which we're able to reclaim a sense of identity and establish a baseline for mental health care services to be able to make a comparison. Meaning, they can make a comparison between who you were in the past and who you are now, and make a future comparison of who you are in the present with regard to who you were in the future. You can't just brush aside who you were in the past because we recognize that's important. Second part of analysis, let's not be vague. How does it look like? It looks like three things, which include but are not limited to: A, categorical simple things like understanding who your friends were, your family, your hobbies, what piqued and sparked your interest. B, things about your likes and dislikes which shape your capacity to make decisions. What did you prioritize? What did you not prioritize? Did you really like debate? Did you want to just debate because you were trying to get away from a toxic parent who made you want to do swimming or something? And C, the role of mental health care services, because we recognize on both sides, trauma is not static as what Gov's side claims it to be, but it's really a dynamic process which affects you. There's an intersectionality that happens on the timeline on side opposition, which we have to validate and understand. Third layer of analysis is understanding the role of mental health care services. Threefold. A, they have to diagnose. B, they have to treat. And C, they have to prevent. On the first, diagnosis. You need to be able to examine in order to truly make a good comparative and say that how you were in the past to the present as opposed or in comparison to who you are now versus in the future, so that you can make certain changes in your medication, in terms of changes in terms of your capacity to be able to have particular treatment or counseling. B, the idea of treatment. That is to say, on-side government, maybe at best you make them feel good when you try to dismiss it, when you try to drown them out in medication and counseling in the guise of trying to move forward from the trauma. But the reality is that in order to truly be free, you need to be understood what shackles you in the first place, what makes you unable to sleep at night, and what harms and shakes you to the core for your every being. C, preventive. And this is very important. It's future-looking. How are you able to deal with future trauma? I'm not entirely sure if you'll really be able to move past that trauma, but I do know is that more trauma can happen in the future because life is hard, and the point in which you are cracked is a point in which things can get worse. And if you want a chance to be able to have a better and brighter future, you need to look at the whole picture, which is why we are very proud to open this debate and stand on side negative. Thank you.